All right, Sheepdog Nation, we are back with you on podcast 10. We'd almost consider that an anniversary edition, podcast 10, but we'll maybe save that for podcast 50 and 100. This has been a lot of fun, and I think everyone, you listen to podcasts because of the topics and the people. Right, the people that podcasts have, special guests, etc. Right, and I think for me that has been the best part of doing a podcast is the opportunity to visit with people that maybe I knew of but didn't know really well, and I got to know them better. But also some people that I've had really good relationships with, friends, people that I admire and respect, and today is one of those. A good friend of mine. We call him Chris, but his full name's Lamont Christian. And I'm excited to talk to Chris today and have you as an audience have an opportunity to learn more about this amazing sheepdog, warrior, father, husband. It's hard for me to say soldier because we like to talk about Marines, and of course he's one of those ultimate soldiers that we love to have that Marine Corps Army banter. But a man that for me not only is a friend, but whether he appreciates it or not, is a mentor to me, and I hope you realize that, Chris, because you've made me a better man by your example. And I think that's what all of us are looking for as men and or women that help lift us up. And we talk about our 3 to 5 in things like Warrior Path and the importance of having men, women, people in our lives that help make us better. And I consider you one of those, my friend. So thank you for being here with us. Podcast. Yeah. Like I said, Sheepdog Nation podcast number 10. All right. I'm excited for us to have a chance to visit and our audience learn more about you as a man, and as a father and a husband and a soldier and all those things. For me, meeting you as a Warrior Path brother, a Warrior Path guide, a Warrior Path director, and what do you call yourself now within the PTG family sphere?
So it's the title that I'm carrying now, if we're going to carry a title, is Director of Post-Traumatic Growth Training at the Big Red Barn Retreat.
At the Big Red Barn Retreat.
Yep.
And for those that don't know, there's a lot here to unpack with you, Chris, because you have an amazing story. You are an amazing man. And it's going to be, it's kind of one of those things of how you and I are connected is through Warrior Path. And Chris has been, did you go through Warrior Path at the Big Red Barn?
No, actually I went through in Arizona.
Okay, that's where I went,
yep.
in Arizona as
Arizona.
well. And then, but you ultimately became the director of, were you the first director?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we stood up the program at the Big Red Barn Retreat, and it was after the family had already had other programs and services for veterans and first responders, and they wanted to bring Warrior Path to South Carolina.
Okay, and so they asked you to be the man to help facilitate and stand up, like our very own Chris Jackson, right?
Right.
So, wow. I've been thinking about it. I always think about when we have guests, I think it's natural, or anytime you meet anyone, and you're going to sit down and visit, is some questions you want to ask, right? And you're really the first one where I was just kind of all over the map. And I think I can't help but laugh when I think of certain things about you, because it's funny because of when you meet someone that you've experienced them in life before but didn't know them, and it's that, and I'm sure you hear this all the time, it's that Gatorade commercial.
Right.
And, we're going to play that Gatorade commercial during this podcast a little bit just so everyone will appreciate it. especially our generation, right? There's obviously older or younger kids are not are probably never heard it, but wasn't that in the 90s?
Yeah, so when the cadence was really originated was around the 80s going into the 90s. And then when I actually recorded it, it was in like the late 80s. Nope, late 90s. And then Gatorade recorded it around 2000. And so that's when it made its resurgence.
Okay.
And yeah, they played it in a couple of commercials. And
It was
yeah,
something like do work, work, work.
yeah,
Wasn't it
it's
like that?
just hard work. Yeah,
Hard work,
yeah,
hard work. And I keep wanting to say do work,
yeah.
but hard work.
Right.
And it was a Gatorade commercial. And this gets a little bit into your background as a soldier. For a while, you were the poster drill instructor for the Army. When I say poster, you were physically the image
Yeah.
of what the Army's drill instructors were, right? And
Right.
representing the Army drill instructor cadre, you were, the poster soldier for, I say drill instructors, I'm sorry, drill sergeants,
Right.
right? I'm going to make that mistake all day. I'm like, what's wrong with you, all this drill sergeant stuff?
Right.
For drill sergeants in the Army. And tell us a little bit, if you will, about that. I know we're having a little bit of fun now. We're going to get into some more serious. But because I really want to come back and you share your story of why you joined the Army. But we're a little ahead of that from the standpoint that how did Gatorade find out about you and ultimately pick you to do that ad? And again, for those that don't know, it's cadence.
Right.
It's soldiers running and running to cadence, and you're chanting, right?
Yeah.
As soldiers and Marines will do, going on a run, and you got your drill instructor, your drill sergeant, your platoon sergeant, whoever that might be out there beside you, leading you in cadence. Gatorade developed a program around that for advertising Gatorade, which was, get out there and get you some, right? Hard work, do work, kind of like the old Nike, just do it.
Right.
I think that was kind of all around the same time.
Yeah, the whole campaign behind that was I think it was one of the Sheen boys, Charlie Sheen, was going through that winning phase. He kept getting in trouble, and then he turned around and was like winning. And so it was in that window of time that Gatorade had already had the commercial, but they shelved it. And then when that campaign came out, next thing you know, they was like, hey, we can take this off the shelf and tagline it with winning is hard work. And so when they did, they brought it out, and it just picked up a lot of momentum and became viral. But to go back in time, so I was teaching at the Army's Drill Sergeant School at Fort Benning, Georgia at the time. This was around 96. And there was a recording studio out of California that I'm going to date myself here, but they used to do the run with the military. You pick it. Run with the Marines, run with the Army, run with the Airborne, run with the Rangers.
I remember those.
And they had cassette tapes. So you go back to Walkman days.
I had one.
And people, right? And so
We had like 2 or 3 different tapes.
And so the irony there is my dad was an airborne instructor at the time in the military. And they went around some of the infantry bases. I think they went to Lejeune. They went to a couple of other places to make those recordings. So fast forward, now I'm in the military, and they're going back around because it was time for them to update their recordings, because now you had Discmans. We got away from the Walkmans, and so they were upgrading the recordings to Discmans. And this was right before MP3 and all of that stuff started to come out. Well, long and short of it is the recording company came out. They solicited to the military. The infantry school at Benning said, yes, we have people that you could go and record. And the drill sergeant school solicited about 3 of us and said, hey, you 3 guys are the ones that we know sing cadence well, so we want you to show up. And we did. We went out that morning, and the 3 of us took turns. And this is the crazy part. When you listen to it, they added acoustical bass and all this other stuff to the background.
Right.
We ran around a parking lot at like 5 o'clock in the morning singing cadence, and this young
They're
lady
recording it as
and
you're
recording as we went around the parking lot. And I won't forget it because the young lady that was there, and was her and her father. She had the old school recording box strapped around her neck, of big headphones around her ears, and then she had this boom mic with the furry end on the mic, and she just went around the parking lot with us as we were singing cadence.
running.
So again, fast forward, now the internet begins to boom, and you got, what is it, Napster and all these other places that are grabbing music and basically giving it away for free. Well, what happened was the father passed away of this recording company and basically bequeathed everything to his daughter. Well, she wasn't doing well, and her brothers in the family, they were into drugs and some other stuff. And so they basically licensed out the recordings that the father and the daughter had done over time. And a couple of those happened to be those cadences, and they licensed them out to Coca-Cola because Gatorade is a subsidiary of Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
And anyway, they got money off of it, and it continued to sit on the shelf. They did some things with it, and it was around 2005, maybe 2006. My son was searching for some cadences to run to, and he came across it and said, he sent it to me. I was actually in Afghanistan at the time, and he sent me a message to say, "Hey, who is this?" And again, this is when like MP3 and Napster and all of the music basically was free on the internet if you would link into it. And I was like, "Oh shit, that's me." And so from there, he shared it with my sister, and my sister did some research and found out the rest of the backstory about Gatorade, making it into a commercial and everything. And then around 2014 is when they turned this into a big commercial. It was 2014, 15, and it was, nationally put on the TV, BCS championship. There was a couple of other games that was
it
happening.
2014 when it really?
Yeah,
That's when it blew
2014, 15. The irony there is that was the year, because remember, 96, 98, I was teaching at the drill sergeant school as a young staff sergeant. Now, fast forward 2014, I've been handpicked to be the commandant for the Army's Drill Sergeant Academy. And in the Army, there's only one drill sergeant institution for all of the components that serve the Army. So regardless, reserve, National Guard, or active, all go through one schoolhouse. Unlike you had the East Coast and West Coast with the Marine Corps DI school. And so when I took over as the commandant, it happened to be the 50th anniversary. You was talking about 50 and 100-year anniversary or episodes. That was the 50th anniversary of the Army's drill sergeant program.
Wow.
And so I fell in, like, everything was the perfect storm.
Yeah. The timing on all that falling in together.
The commercial was starting to become viral. I had just stepped into the position as the commandant, and later on that year, we were scheduled to host a 50th anniversary. So it was easy to continue that conversation about the importance of being a drill sergeant in the Army. We were coming out of the peak of the war. So there was a lot of things that helped kind of push this, because we were trying to get more drill sergeants in the billets.
It was a recruiting opportunity to use that to recruit drill sergeants.
Everything, right?
Wow.
Yeah. So
lined up perfectly.
The timing was just right. Yeah.
So that's, so you changed my whole timeline in my head for you. You were doing that cadence, totally different reason, and you just got randomly picked because of one of the three,
That was it.
better drill sergeants at the time.
Yep.
Were you a drill sergeant then when you recorded that?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you were on the field. Now, y'all call it the drill field?
Yeah. It's drill field, drill pad.
Okay.
Yep.
So you were wearing a hat, as we call it in the Marine Corps.
Yep.
You were wearing the hat, and but it wasn't until many years later that this really went viral, and again, it lined up perfectly, where you are the man, so to speak, and bam, you're popping out on this Gatorade commercial.
Yeah.
I was thinking it all kind of aligned together, but actually it all went separately and then came together.
Yeah, because if you Google and you pull up any of the Run With These something, you fill in the blank. That recording company had been recording. It was a historical recording. That's what they were doing it
Mm.
for, to capture military history.
Yeah.
And it turned into something profitable, of course, where they could sell those tapes. But over time, people have taken advantage of the licensing and everything else that took place, and how loose everything was with copywriting.
Yeah.
And so if you Google it, there'll be other versions of it. There's other people who have recorded it and made their own albums. But yeah, it was along the same lines of Run With, and then you fill it in there. Airborne, the Marines, the Air Force, the Rangers, and they usually will drop some of those recordings on there.
You know, what's funny about it for myself is I think about those tapes, and I think there were, Run With the Marines, version 2, 3,
Yep.
something like that. There were several. There was more than one, and I was a sergeant and staff sergeant. I think I was even maybe a corporal when those first started coming out as well. But I remember there being 3 to 4 years where those tapes were popular.
Yep.
But I would use them to get ready for runs.
Right.
The next day when I would, it's kind of funny when you think about it. As a young corporal and a sergeant, I was always getting called out to call cadence as well, and it was. I was like, man, I need some new material.
Right.
So I'd listen to these tapes
Right.
to try and get some new material, and every once in a while, I wouldn't admit this back then, but I'll go ahead and disclose now. There were a few times I got a couple of those Army tapes, and I may have stolen some Army material a few times, but it was, and it is so funny to think back because you're bringing back so many memories. As I think, I'd forgotten about those tapes. You said it, and I was like, no, I used to use those to get ready for runs the next morning. PT.
That's right.
It's like I need some new material to get out there and run. The thing that stood out to me though is I can't remember any of them being dirty. They were all clean cadence.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right, and the only cadence we knew back then was profane, right? There was a lot of dirty language used in them, to be honest about it.
Yep.
And but it was usually some motivation. There was some humor in that profanity, whereas most of those tapes were clean.
Yeah.
So when you talk about historical, they're not accurate because we were out there talking some raunchy stuff a lot of times.
Yeah.
And this was the cleaned up version of history.
Yeah.
When it came, so I wish they had the explicit versions. Also, it's kind of like here's a clean version, like they do today, and here's your explicit, so that you could really capture the history of that language.
Yeah.
But I tell you what, we're going to pause here, and we're going to play the Gatorade commercial. Give you a chance, just a snippet of it for y'all to appreciate, because I'm sure that it's been heard before, and for some of you, it probably bring back some fun memories of hearing it. Audience, we have been, the great thing is we take a break and we come back, but there's those pauses in between where we're really having fun, some continued conversations, and we've been covering a little bit of the history of cadence, i.e. talking about the Gatorade commercial and the tie-ins there, but we've been talking about the history of cadence and the evolution of, for me, I was sitting here thinking about, as you were talking about the evolution of cadence coming out of World War I.
Right.
I was thinking, though, two things. I don't want to get too far off balance on these. Music, though, as part of the military has been a long time.
That's
right. I can remember watching a lot of Civil War documentaries, and whether it was, Dixie and She Wore a Yellow Ribbon And a lot of those old popular songs during that time,
Right.
the soldiers would sing,
Right.
and but it and that's where it was intriguing as you brought up the history of the chant portion. Though
Right.
you had singing, you had
Right.
songs, you had
Right.
music. I always think about the bagpipes,
Yep.
with the British military,
Yeah, drummer
and
boys and the fife and
drums
yep.
and all of that.
And most
Bugles.
regiments had a little section
Yes.
that they would march to the beat of the drum. Hence the phrase "march to the beat of the drum."
Absolutely.
Right. And then over time, because that was the traditional way that we fought battles.
Uh-huh.
And you would move.
So you also gave commands and
Exactly.
signals was through
Exactly.
music.
Right. And so, but to your point about the call and response over time, that has its roots, believe it or not, in the period of enslavement in American history, because that's what the chain gangs and the work teams would do to stay in rhythm together, and it would make a long day a short day.
Well, when you say that, and this is where, as I can remember looking back on old movies like that, and you would see slaves in fields singing. But to your point, I do remember some chants where
Right.
you'd have one man sing a portion of the song, and then everyone in the field would sing along.
That's right. Right. Call and response is
Call
what
and
they call
response.
It. Yep.
So, but you're saying the military didn't take that on until after World War One, or from
Right.
World War One on.
Right.
But it goes back historically, as you were talking, from whether slavery and, I mean, there's no telling how far it goes back from that, right?
Right.
You don't know, from just a bigger historical picture, how long peoples of the world, and whether enslavement or whatever it might be,
Right.
would have used some of that cadence music
Mm-hmm.
just to, again, keep them working. To your point, that rhythm of the job, whether it was hammering railroad tracks or,
Exactly.
some other chore that was being required, right?
Right. Right.
So, but then in the military, it's kind of, you're in the military and you got to keep everybody organized and moving. The history behind all of that is intriguing.
Yeah, because if you look at America, the United States as a military, and I'm not a deep diving historian, but I just had to kind of learn a little bit more about my craft, which was being an infantryman, and then later being the commandant at the drill sergeant academy.
It's important that you know the history.
Right. And so World War One, we as a nation were caught off guard. We weren't prepared for World War One when it happened, and so
One of our lowest budgetary times spending on the military was then.
and our military was still in the mindset of the previous wars and how war was fought. Formations where they moved and flanked together as an entire element. So we had to reconfigure the way that we moved formations, the way that we fought. And so that's why when it was introduced as a call and response or a cadence calling, it kind of took off because we were moving larger formations as we began to, draft and create all of these different post camps and stations to train people to go to war. They had to move them around, and so cadence calling
Cadence
kind of
became
took
more
off.
important,
Right.
because to your point of the larger movements. And the other thing that stood out to me a minute ago as we were talking offline is the shift you were talking about. Cadence was really, because we only know what we've been exposed to, we think of cadence, I did anyway, of it was only motivating when it was dirty, when it was crass. But you made a great point of saying it wasn't like that until the Vietnam era, because you had a darker, disrespected military man that comes home, and it's just a darker, more inappropriate cadence call. And you were talking about the shift where it
Right.
then started to be cleaned up.
Right.
And I'll be honest, I was in 20 years before it started to clean up. And then I started to think about, again, history.
Right.
The Army started bringing in females into all aspects of your training, starting at boot camp, much, much earlier than the Marine Corps.
Right.
So the need to clean up your cadence started well before ours did,
Yeah,
from a Marine Corps standpoint.
And from a tribal view, it's the same thing in certain branches in the military. certain installations in the military would often, that was that unspoken rule that you could say those things or you say those cadences that were profound or profane in that sense. Um, but then, as you stated, once the awareness became
Oh, there's a
more,
woman in our ranks or whatever.
well, even just the awareness period, right?
Uh-huh.
Because a lot of those cadences, even if it wasn't women, it talked about, like we talked earlier, was it napalm, sticking to babies, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
again, when you start,
I don't remember that one. That must have been an Army one.
it actually was one, right? But again, that's the point, right?
Yeah.
You start
Where you
really
start going,
looking
oh,
at
that's
it,
a little much.
and so it really didn't have anything to do with women necessarily. It was just an awareness, right? We began to be to
Recognize we were pushing an envelope that didn't need to be pushed.
so those conversations would happen, and
Yeah.
then like you said, I'll give you a prime example. So when we had celebrated the 50th anniversary of the drill sergeant program for the Army, we did a run, and it was a historical era run, so that you could run in a group based off of when you served as a drill sergeant. So we had drill sergeants that served in the I think it was in the 70s. Then we had drill sergeants that served in the 80s, and drill sergeants served in the 90s. And to your point, it was really humorous to me because
To listen to the difference.
to listen to the different cadences.
Wow, yes.
And you could hear it because when the drill sergeants from the 70s and 80s ran by, like they were getting after it, right? And those are the ones, and they weren't running fast because the way I had the formation was they were towards the rear of the formation. So the current students that were in training at the time was in the front. And then we just went by
Worked our
era
way
all the way
backwards.
towards the back. And so that way the drill sergeants from the 70s, they could walk if they wanted to. And it was a short run. It was 2 routes that we went. The more physically fit people ran the 4-mile route, and everybody else had a short 1-mile route. And they wound up linking up together. But as I was running past the formation, to your point, I could hear the different cadence calling just based on the era that they were running in. Yeah.
Well, and you say that, boy, in some ways it's embarrassing now as we generationally have evolved in so many ways. I can remember getting out in formation and asking the question before I started cadence, do we have any females with us today? And that determined my cadence and whether it was clean or dirty.
Right.
And now that didn't start till I was probably year 15 as a Marine.
Right.
Because I didn't serve with a female until I'd been in 20 plus years. You know, the infantry side of the Marine Corps, starting at boot camp all the way up, whether you're infantry or not, boot camp, you know, we're just now as a Marine Corps
Right.
in boot camp starting to bring men and women together to train. But yeah, I could remember stepping out and going, hey, do we have any females with us today? Whether it was an admin female that was running with us for PT or whatever it might be.
Right.
And that always drove what I was going to sing. But to that point, I can now, and, you know, this is one of those things about you and I, and why I think I've enjoyed our friendship is, as a fellow sergeant major in the Army, sergeant major in the Marine Corps, it's nice to be able to talk to a peer and discuss things, life, right? And that's part of what I'm enjoying about every time we're together, and especially today, is that as I became a senior enlisted Marine, I started checking Marines that were using language in cadences or whatever that was even remotely offensive, right? But then there are times when I can remember kicking back and listening to cadence and going, wow, how much it's changed generationally.
Right.
Because there was probably a 10-year gap where I wasn't calling it and I wasn't much around it much for different reasons.
Right.
But then as I started to get back into that troop element, I think it was during the deployments. There was like 10 years of deployments where I don't remember us chanting it because you didn't chant on deployment. Right. So just different things there. It's intriguing. I know we've gotten way off on topic on things. We've talked about this topic a lot longer than I'd planned, but it's been fun historically.
I was going to say, though, like even with that shift, like you were talking about when you changed language, but what caused you to do that? Like, what was the reason that you evolved to that point where it's like, hey, Marine?
Yeah, you know, that's the intriguing part. The first evolution was when more females started to come into infantry level activities, or just being more immersed in everyday life within the Marine Corps. And the other was maturity. You know, I just began to mature.
Right.
And I think from even a father's standpoint, it was, yeah, I don't want that crap sung around my daughters. I wouldn't want my daughter hearing me sing crap like that, right? And I think it's that maturity level. I think because when you're more immature, you want to hear the dirty stuff. But as you grow up and mature professionally, it's kind of like hazing.
Right.
You know, we grew up in an era where, I mean, for me, hazing was an important part of the Marine Corps,
Right.
just like drinking.
Right.
You know, there was a time, and this is really getting off topic, where, you know, if you didn't have at least 2 DWIs in the Marine Corps, they wouldn't promote you to staff sergeant. And I'm exaggerating a little, but that's how important alcohol was
Right.
to the Corps.
Right.
And
It's
of course,
another rite of passage.
yes, being
Right.
born in a bar, in a tavern, added to that culture, right? But you do the evolution of, you don't have to be drunk, you don't have to be crass, you don't have to be a lot of things to be professional. And I think, unfortunately, for us as a Corps, it took too long.
Right.
It's kind of like the servant leader. I was a first sergeant before I heard Sergeant Major Castle say, as a leader, your focus should be as a servant leader. And that's the opposite of what a lot of us were taught. Leader meant you beat people's asses, or you drive them. And when he said, you need to be a good leader is a servant leader, I went, whoa, wait a second. You're telling me I need to serve the men and women that I lead? And that was a major shift for me as a leader, and understanding truly what it meant to lead. And so you talk about those evolutions,
Right.
that maturity. And then for me, from that point on, I was like, why did it take me being in 20 years to hear the statement servant leadership? So from that point on, what did I drive home with my junior Marines
Right.
that had been in 1 and 2 years and up? Is it starts now. Starts now with you being in 1 or 2 years and up. Your focus as a leader should be that of a servant leader. It's not about how many cuss words I can say, how much drinking I can do, and how much hazing I can perform. It's about, am I taking care of you? Am I doing the right thing by you in making you a killer, right? And making you a warrior. There's a professional way to do it.
Right.
So, we're going to shift now into some more serious topics from the standpoint of you and your career, because I do want to hear a little bit about why you chose to join the Army, why you chose a life of service. Because if I'm not mistaken, 33 years?
33, yeah.
33 years in the Army.
Yeah.
And, I mean, for those of us in the military, we know that 20 years is when most people start retiring, if they're lucky to get that far. And for those of us that went to 30-plus years, we're unique, because that just doesn't happen very often, right? And so we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to come back and talk a little bit more about your life and story, and have the audience have an opportunity to learn more about you as a man. I'm going to take a moment real quick just to thank our sponsor, Pro Trucks of Siloam Springs, Arkansas, for the amazing support they show us as an organization and for helping make today's podcast possible. Chris, we've spent a long time talking about some topics that I really didn't have us spending that much time on, but I've enjoyed it thoroughly.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you, and as our audience knows, or anyone that knows me, I'm a big history buff. So any opportunity I have to learn and hear and connect some dots that for me weren't quite there historically has been nice. So I appreciate you sharing. But on that note, we're going to get into a little bit more serious, just from a standpoint of getting to know you better, and kind of letting people, as we do this journey, they'll start to understand how you and I have come to meet. obviously, again, through the Warrior Path side, but you and I have taken different journeys or paths, so to speak. And I think I've heard it before, but I'm curious to make sure that I've heard it accurately, and I know our audience would like to know. And that's, why did you choose to join the Army? What was the driving force behind you saying, I want to put on that uniform and I want to serve my country?
So I do have to put this footnote out there first. I was almost about to join the Marines.
Well, of course you were. I mean,
Right.
I could tell that about you. You're a good
And
man.
what I will tell you is that I didn't, of course, as you know. But
Yeah.
it was because I was told I wouldn't get the blues upon graduation. So at the time, the only ones that I guess got the blues were the embassy duty Marines.
Issued to them.
Right. They were issued.
And recruiters.
Right. And so I was like, oh, well, if that's the case, then I'm not
But you
gonna-
could have bought them at the PX the
Yeah,
day
right,
after you
right, right.
graduated.
Yeah.
And
so-
you know that I think every few years we give dress blues and they
Right.
graduate in them.
Right.
And then somebody decides, well, we don't have the money for that anymore, so they cut that out.
Right.
And then they bring it back.
And then
So
So I missed it by a few years.
You
then.
did.
But, so the reality was I really had no desire to join the military at all. So,
Really?
yeah, so I grew up in New York City. My mom and she was a single mom, and it was just me growing up till I was about maybe 13, 14-ish. And my dad came into our life, and basically he married my mother and I and said, hey, look, I want to provide for you. He was a Vietnam War soldier who got out and was going to medical school when he met my mother. But he couldn't take care of a ready-made family going to medical school, whatever the GI Bill was covering. And so he said, I do know one thing that I could do. I can join the military again. So he went back into the military, and of all places, he got assigned to the 82nd Airborne. So he had served in Vietnam as a helicopter gunner for 1H Hueys.
The
He had
Hueys.
done that out of Chu Lai in Vietnam. That was most of the places he was in, the AmeriCal division. And like I said, he got out and went to something he was comfortable with and went back into the military. And then he got assigned as a paratrooper in the 82nd.
wow.
So we relocate to Fayetteville, North Carolina. That was kind of a culture
This
shock
is your
for me.
stepdad.
Yeah, and I call him my dad because, like we talked about earlier, role models, people we look up to, and I did. I looked up to him, and really, I had other men in my life, my uncles. There was a few people in the neighborhood that during that time period in the 80s and the 70s, most communities took care of the children in the community. So, like, I had father-like figures in the community. But when he came into our life, he began to demonstrate to me what I thought a man was supposed to be. You know, the provider, that person who was there that people could lean on and things of that nature. And so he relocated us to Fayetteville. I finished up high school there, and I go off to college because I'm following what my parents' dream is. Hey, we want you to go to college. So I'm in college, and now I got to pay for it. Because, again, yeah, he's in the military, and this was before the GI Bill and all of these other benefits that, service members can do now where they can transfer their college credits or the benefits and entitlements to their children. Yeah. So I had to figure out how I was going to pay for school. The crazy thing is I had no desire whatsoever to join the military because he was never around. Like, my parents didn't attend any of my sports events. They weren't there for anything significant. As a matter of fact, the night that I graduated from high school, he was in Egypt participating in a multinational peacekeeping force and observer mission. And so I get a letter from him, like, I don't know, a month later saying congratulations and good luck, basically.
Yeah.
So I felt some kind of way in that aspect. I still looked up to him because of his hard work, but I also knew I didn't want that lifestyle of being in the military. And yet, there I was needing to put myself through school, and the answer was the reserves. So I was able to join the reserves right off the bat.
Army Reserves.
Army Reserves. Mm-hmm. And of all jobs, I was assigned as a parachute rigger.
Really?
So I was packing parachutes, and we were talking earlier about joining the military at age 17 because I was already in college. That was my freshman year. When I took off that summer to go to training, parachute rigger is the only skill in the military where you go straight to jump school right out of basic training.
Yeah.
So I took off. I go to jump school now. I'm a paratrooper, and then next thing I know, that same summer, I'm packing parachutes for people to jump out of planes. And so I'm at 17 years old with people's lives at the end of my fingertips.
Absolutely.
So anyway, long and short of it, I continued to do that in the reserves, and the very thing that drew me to the reserves, not just for financial reasons, but the camaraderie that I began to see was the same camaraderie that I saw that my dad had with his friends that would come over. You know, sometimes you would have people from all ethnicities and backgrounds sitting in my living room, talking and joking and spending time with my dad. And I got the chance to experience that when I went to basic and, of course, jump school. So fast forward, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, man, I really like this experience, and I'm really getting tired of college, right? Going to classes, studying. And so I decided to transfer from the reserves to active duty. And I was like, okay, what jobs do you have? And it's like, well, we got this thing called the infantry. So I'm like, okay, here we go. So here I am now. I transfer over, go active duty, and I'm following behind my dad's footsteps, literally and figuratively. I'm a paratrooper in the 82nd. I'm getting all these tough assignments. I'm going to all these different schools, and I'm moving along in my career very much similar to the way that he did. And to the point where, as a young staff sergeant, prior to being selected to go be a drill sergeant, my father and I actually served in the same battalion, the same infantry battalion for a short period of time.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was a short period of time, maybe about 9-10 months. He had PCS'd and rotated back in to Bragg from Korea. And he got assigned to our battalion as one of the first sergeants, and I was about 4 companies down from him in another battalion. Same battalion, but a different company.
Different company.
And we jumped together, did a few jumps, and then he got transferred over to, of all places, the IG office. And then I was selected to go be a drill sergeant.
So did y'all have a chance to actually spend time together
We
visiting
did.
as soldiers, fellow soldiers?
We actually did. The irony there was, so he was a jump master, airborne instructor, and everything. He put me through jump school. He was one of the primary instructors that were there when I went through jump school.
Did you see him while you were at jump school?
I did.
Okay.
As a reserve soldier, when I went through, a lot of his friends knew I was going to be going to jump school. But they knew I was in college at the time, so they was assuming I was coming through as an officer. And so the alpha numeric nomenclature and identifying numbers for the students, for officers, always started off with like an alpha.
Yes.
And so I went through, and I just had a regular roster number. So they were looking for an officer roster number the whole week.
They never could find you.
So I was under the radar for
I was going to ask if they gave you hell.
Yeah, so the first week I was under the radar. Second week I was under the radar up until the last day. And second week is Tower Week. And then one of the instructors was there, and he called my roster number out, and they called me over. And he was like, oh, you thought you was going to get out of here? So I got smoked, all the way back to the barracks. But it was the last day, so I was like, we're good.
I can deal with this.
Yeah, and then when the third week of airborne training occurred, I went down. We do the long run to Lawson Airfield, get our parachutes and get the briefing. But when we showed up, my father was one of the cadre members down there, and him and about 5 of his friends were looking for me in the formation. And I knew that I anticipated something was going to happen, so I was in the back hiding out. What'd I do that for? So all of them came to the back end of the formation, and they circled around me and got my little welcome to jump week. But, so we jumped together.
They pin you?
So he did.
Blood wings?
He did. And the way it worked out was you got to do 5 jumps there. And the first jump, he was one of the primary jump masters, so he threw me out the plane. I was the number 1 jumper, and he was able to be the jump master there.
That's
and then
awesome, though.
On my 5th jump, he jumped with me, and so
very
we
nice.
walked across the field together.
I love that.
Yeah.
I do. I think my dad was a Marine,
Yep.
but an officer,
Right.
Huey pilot, Cobra Huey pilot, and there's those special moments. And I don't know. I asked this because I didn't know what else to do. I mean, I grew up in the Marine Corps, so being a Marine just seemed natural. It's kind of like a farmer's son, right? Either you're going to be a farmer or you're not going to be a farmer. Which is it? And but do you was this similar for you in the fact that I don't think my dad and I ever understood each other? Because I didn't. I mean, my dad was like yours. He was gone all the time.
Yep.
I mean, he was a consummate Marine, and flying was, you had to live on the flight deck to get flight time. So he was just never home. But I did. I respected him. I loved him. I respected him for the fact that he was serving his country, right? But it wasn't until I became a Marine and my dad and I overlapped in the Marine Corps by about 2 years. Never served together, but wore the uniform at the same time. And but I don't think he and I ever understood each other until I became a Marine. Does that make sense?
It does.
Was it similar for you and your dad?
And actually, it was. And so when you talk about it, earlier we were talking about these evolutions, right? So the first evolution, looking back, I didn't understand my dad because what I know now, having done the training that we do in post-traumatic growth and awareness and self-awareness, looking back, I realize now that was his way of just dealing with life, right?
Yeah.
There was periods of time where I would try to talk to him, and he would spend more time in the TV or whatever else he was doing, and so I didn't realize at the time that he was trying to decompress, or he was trying to process his life. And so fast forward, now we're both in the military, and while we have, shared experiences, could talk about certain aspects of our job, being infantrymen and things of that nature, that was really our only connection that we had. Like, we still hadn't really became father-son.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until, again, next evolution, when he began to retire and then left the military, and now he wanted to be able to connect and ask those questions. Hey, do they still do this in the military? Are they still doing that? And then that was where our conversation kind of changed a little bit, where we got, I won't say closer, but I was able to understand him better.
Yeah.
And so our relationship, while it has never been as close as I would say I would have wanted it as a teenager, it has gotten closer in the aspect of me recognizing and understanding who he was as a man and as a father.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're able to connect some dots that are harder for us, and it's that maturity thing again. When you're young and you're immature, and it's just life. We don't have enough life under our belt yet to really understand what life can do to you and how it changes you, but more importantly, how it matures you. And I think I'm fortunate in the fact that I never felt resentment towards my dad. For whatever reason, I just was like, that's just part of it. But I think it was because, to your point, with mentors and men that you looked up to, there were other men available. And mine was my grandfather. My mother's dad was a man that was kind of a little bit of that father replacement for me. So I was getting it. I just wasn't getting it from my dad, right? So it's, there's an aspect of us having a conversation that there's so many similarities in certain ways that you and I have, and I think that's part of why we've been friends. But also a lot of life experiences that are just so very different at the same time. And we talk a lot about, I think a lot about how you and I in this warrior path realm and the challenges there, and then, the life portion and the service portion of what we've done. Now, you married a fellow soldier.
I did.
Was your wife was a soldier at the time when y'all met?
Yep.
And of course you had a family. And how many kids?
4. We had 4 children.
And twin daughters, a son and another daughter?
Oldest daughter.
Is that right?
Yep.
Okay. And your son is he's in law enforcement, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he's in the pipeline to go to the police academy later this year.
Okay. So he didn't go the Army route. Ever.
No.
So it's just law enforcement.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't remember if maybe he had spent some time in the Guard or some military, but he did not choose the military lifestyle.
No, none of them wanted to do anything with the military.
Well, a mother and a father, in the military makes it. Now, how long? No, what's your wife's first name?
So it's Angie.
Angie.
Yeah.
Okay. And how long did she spend in the Army?
She did 20 21 years, about 21, because she was in, got out, and then came back in
So
and
she has a
started over.
broken
So it's
time.
21 years.
Was she a drill instructor?
She served as a drill sergeant for a short period.
I'm
Yep.
sorry, drill sergeant.
Yep.
I'm a damn Marine Corps language, right? I'm going to say drill instructor always. But so she was a drill sergeant as well, and so that life for your family. I mean, when we talk about the military, it's rare that both parents, right, are serving. There's always, I think, in every unit I was ever in, there was always one or two Marines that I knew that were married to other service members. But how do you feel? How was that for your family? From a standpoint of just were there times when you were both deployed at the same time, or was
Yeah.
the Army good? So Army wasn't able to keep y'all from both being gone at the same time.
There was about 2 deployments total that we wound up deploying at the same time. And the other 4 deployments was either me leaving, and then somewhere in that window she would leave later, or vice versa. We wound up just like tag teaming on the deployment.
And what year did you join the Army?
So it was 84, summer of 84 when I joined the reserves, and came in on active duty in the summer of 87.
So you were 4 years ahead of me. The and you retired what year then?
2018.
So we retired the same year. I was trying to remember, there was a connection where you and I had a similar year, and I
Yep.
thought we came in the same time, but you came in ahead of me. But you retired in 18. We both did. And when did you go through Warrior Path?
That was 2019.
2000. Okay, so
Yeah.
well, then I guess I was maybe. What month did you go?
That was October. So it was class, what was that, 45?
Okay, well then I was there in December.
Yep.
So we were just a couple months apart from Warrior Path as
Yeah.
well.
As a matter of fact, I think that was when, was it the March, April time frame was when we had done that podcast that we redid about 6 times.
Yeah.
Was it March or April the following
That's
year?
right. That's
Yeah.
right. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because the first 3 weren't recorded.
Yeah, they hit. How do you do a podcast 3 times and fail to hit record all 3 times?
Yeah.
3 different days, right? So now we're saying that. I wonder if our team
I was
here
getting
has
ready to say, you guys got red lights
Jeff,
on?
John, are we good on recording?
Okay.
So, man, yeah, that brings back. Yeah, there's a lot. A lot has happened
Right.
since when you and I went through Warrior Path, and we didn't know each other then yet.
Right.
And so what for you? I mean, I think I've shared in here. I mean, I was retiring. I was going through a divorce at the same time. And for me, just life did not have any balance in it. And it was through one of our senators that I heard about Warrior Path. And I went just to listen, see if it was a program worth sending some of the men and women we work with through the program. And then, of course, I go through it, and I'm like, well, I'm here for me. I need this, right, as much as anybody. How did you hear about Warrior Path, and what set you kind of on that path to go?
So in 2018, I retired in it was October of 2018. I took my uniform off. In November of 2018, one of my 4 children, Alexandra, had taken her life. She committed suicide a month later.
A month after you took your uniform off.
Right.
Okay, and I'm sorry because I was thinking it had been sooner when your daughter had taken her life. But so you're not going through a divorce, but for me, you're going through something as a parent, and we talked about this earlier, that I can't imagine anything worse happening as a parent than losing a child, right? And as we visited, and I shared that with you. So you're going through ending your adult career, what has defined, similarly, most of your life, because you grew up in it, and now you've been in it, and a month after you retire, you lose your daughter to suicide.
Yeah.
Okay.
The challenge there really was I went through the grieving process over a little bit of time, but I was standing there looking at my family, not able to help them. I had to help all kinds of organizations, units, families get through the loss of life. Out of all my deployments, I never lost anyone on the battlefield. We had people that were severely wounded, but we were able to treat them and get them back home. But I started losing soldiers back here,
Yeah.
right? But that moment in my time, in my life, I couldn't help my youngest daughter because she struggled because she's the twin. So every day she looked in the mirror, she saw her reflection, and
So
so yeah, they were all struggling with this loss, and I couldn't
loss.
help them.
And I hate to interrupt on that, but you've shared that portion before, and until you said it, and I'm hoping the audience will grasp that because it's hard to comprehend, but it's so very powerful that as a twin, you're looking in the mirror every day when you look at your twin.
Right.
You're looking at yourself when you're identical twins. You lose your twin sister, and when you look in the mirror, you see your sister. You see your loved one looking back at you, quite literally from the standpoint of being a twin.
Right. You take that from the individual perspective, but then also the family and friends.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because they're around you all the time, and it's the same thing as I'm used to
You're
seeing
looking
both
at.
of you.
Oh my gosh!
And now
yes.
I don't see this person.
And I'm
so,
sorry. Yeah, you're
yeah.
right. All of you are looking at. Yes.
Right. So yeah, everyone is affected differently based off of the loss, and that was where I struggled because I couldn't help them deal with it. Right. And so
And why is that? Why couldn't you help them? Because of your own
yes.
turmoil inside?
Right.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, if you talk about a career, 31 of the 33 years that I served, I was a non-commissioned officer in charge of somebody else's life. Most of the time, if somebody came to me, I was a fixer, and I was able to fix the situation and keep it moving.
That's what we did. We
Right.
fixed things.
And so here I am in this situation, and all of the things that, a person goes through in the grieving process was happening for me, but it was also happening for the people around me that I cared about, and I couldn't do anything to help them. So as this continued, I was doing all of the things that, a person does when they're in a diminished state, right? I was isolating. I had excuses for not participating in keynote events, or somebody would invite me to something, and I say, yeah, I got stuff to do, and so it was because I was beating myself up with all of the negative thoughts and the feelings that was associated with why can't I help the people that I care about, right? And I'm watching them and just disintegrate in front of me. Their behaviors, the things that they were doing over time was becoming something that is like, okay, how is it possible that I can't help these individuals to get past this? And so
I can help all these other people,
right,
but I can't help the people I care the most about.
right, and so I got involved with the Big Red Barn Retreat just because of the relationship they had with the base while I was there.
So this was before Warrior Path.
Yes, this was before
Okay, so
Warrior
you'd
Path
been
even showed up.
introduced to the Big Red Barn
Right.
before
Right.
you ever heard about Warrior Path.
Right. And
Okay.
so I had already had a relationship with them in that aspect of supporting the soldiers that were assigned to Fort Jackson. They had respite programs out there for the drill instructors and the drill sergeants whenever they would take a break of being on the trail or under the hat. They get like a little 10-day break, and they would go out there for one of those days. And it was they would learn different wellness practices, yoga, Tai Chi. So they had several services that were operating in silos. One of the other things that they did have there was a veterans coffee group that would meet weekly. The thing about it was the veterans coffee group, it was established in all goodness, but it turned into how do I get my benefits, and let me gripe about the VA and everything else.
A bitching session.
Right? And
Yeah.
so what they did was they continued to do that, but they would lose people. Some people would show up, and then they would be gone.
They turned them off.
And so one day they asked me if I would come in and help one of the participants navigate the VA system, because he was not aware that, when you talk about benefits, that's not directly tied to the VA on the medical side. And so he was really squandering on how he was trying to figure out what he should do next as far as his entitlements and benefits as a veteran. But he was angry. And I was asked by a mutual friend of the co-founder of the Big Red Barn if I wouldn't mind coming and maybe helping him, since I had recently retired. Maybe I could help him out. This was 2019. So I did. I went and I sat down. I listened to the young man, and I just basically pointed out a few things that he was unaware of, and that was the end of my conversation. But what I was unaware was the co-founder was wanting to bring Warrior Path as a program to South Carolina. And what she needed was one of the 4 P's that the program really focuses on, and that was the people. Right? She understood the philosophy, she had the place, and she was willing to take on the program, but she didn't have the 1 P, which was the people yet.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that she was real adamant about was I need to find somebody to be in charge of this thing or be a director of the program. And she reached out and asked if I would mind, and I said, well, I have no desire to work, none whatsoever. I had turned down jobs, across the country, turned down local jobs. I just did not want to work.
And this was all within the year of your daughter.
Yep.
Okay.
And so I said I would at least have a conversation out of respect for this woman. And I sat down, and she talked to me about the program. She talked to me about Josh Goldberg and Ken Falk. All that stuff was going in one ear and out the other.
Yeah.
And so finally she said 3 things to me that stuck out. And the only reason these 3 things stuck out was because a few months before we had this conversation, I came across 3 words. And I don't hang out on social media, but it was one of those things in Facebook where they have like a bunch of letters. They said, what's the first 3 words that pop out? And it's typically, like home, prosper, just these arbitrary words. Well, the 3 words that popped out was purpose, breakthrough, and self-care. They meant nothing to me when I saw it, but they kind of stuck out. I was like, purpose, breakthrough, and self-care. I meant, okay, whatever. So now I'm sitting down with Sutton Shaw is her name. She's the co-founder. We're sitting down. She's invited me to lunch. And I said, okay, let me hear what you got to say. And she's telling me all this stuff. It's going in one ear after the other. And then she says to me, the reason I want to bring this program here is because when the participants go through it, it'll help them redefine their purpose. Like, okay. And this program is a breakthrough program. Who uses the word breakthrough when describing something new nowadays, right? It's either new, improved, or upgraded, but not breakthrough.
Yeah.
So now she's got my attention because it's like, okay, purpose and breakthrough, like there's no way that this could be popping up in this conversation. And then she says, but what I really like about it is because it's not a fire and forget program. When they leave, it'll help them provide themselves with their own way to give themselves self-care. Purpose, breakthrough, and self-care.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, now you got my attention.
Yeah.
So we continued to have the conversation, and I said I'd be interested in it. And
No
then,
coincidences, right?
Yeah, exactly. So at that point, I said, okay, I'm interested. And the only way that I can even speak to this program is I got to attend it. And she's like, well, that was the intention behind it. I was like, I got it. So let's go. So I had to wait a couple of classes. And then because at that time, some of the other partner locations were being developed and built. And so the cadre of Path Guides was kind of going through, and Arizona and Virginia was pretty much stacked. And so it was kind of hard to get a slot. So I just sat back and waited until the last minute. And Kevin Larson called me up and said, hey, I'm going to be your Path Guide. I want to do your interview. We talked a few minutes. And next thing I know, I'm in Arizona. I'm going through Path. And when I came out of that, I'm still in touch with my 6 brothers that I went through, Class 45. We call ourselves the Wolf Pack. I came out of there with a better understanding of the things that I needed to do in order to be better for me. And that was the beginning of me understanding how the Warrior Path training, the whole philosophy of post-traumatic growth as an individual helps the people around you. And so that's when I began to watch the different things take place with my children and my family. And while, we talked about this earlier about the relationships and what happens when you go back. And while it didn't bring me closer to my spouse, we actually began the process of separating, right? Because my growth happened, and her growth didn't necessarily occur at the same rate. While it may have, we just grew apart. Yeah. And understandably, that growing apart can also be attributed to the statistic of, 80% of marriages fail after the loss of a child. Yeah. Regardless of how much effort is put in, one of the parents, may go down a certain road, and the other parent may go down another road, and it just pulls you even further apart.
I can only imagine how you each as individuals, though, and not in a negative, bad way. It's just part of how we as people process things. Life changes. Everything about how you look at life potentially changes, right? So it doesn't mean that, I think you're saying that from the standpoint that I think as much as a married couple are one, you're still different people. And something as traumatic as losing a child will change you in ways that you never could have foreseen or planned for, right? And the way it changes you each as individuals can obviously create a massive gap and change in that marriage, right?
Yeah. And so, you know, you get to a certain point where through your own growth, the realization sets in, and you know, you wind up having to make the decisions that you need in order to do better and be better. And that's where the challenge usually comes in. It's like, you know, you have to make this choice to say, am I going to continue to go down this road of self-destruction, or am I going to go down this road of self-improvement, like whatever that's going to be, the better version of me 2.0, and what does that look like? And so what I recognize over time is that this training that we do is really, to your point, when you went through and you said, I needed this training, it turns into a leadership course, because people that look up to you will begin to see the change in your behavior and your attitude and say, okay, there's something different. This is more positive. I can get with this. And how can I get more of that? What is it that's different about you? What are you doing that's different? And so when people around you begin to see that, that's where their growth also occurs.
Yeah.
And so we talk about evolution, right? Those changes that we go through over time, that's what we are able to share with other people.
Yeah.
And somebody that might have ran up on me 10 years ago would say, yeah, you're the same, but you're different, right?
Yeah.
You still have this, you know, focus that you have, but I can see now that, you know, you're less apt to just jump right into something and head first and, you know, run through a wall, whereas now it's not that you're hesitant, but you're more thoughtful.
And that's that level of maturity we've talked about, right? But to your point, you know, maturity can come, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it lessens the poor decision making. You may be more thoughtful before you make a bad decision, but it doesn't stop you from making bad decisions. And but yeah, you talk about the two paths you can take. I know in Warrior Path we talk about the two wolves that you can feed, right? The good wolf and the bad wolf that live inside each of us. And, you know, ultimately at the end of the story, it's about a young man talking to his granddad and saying, well, you know, which wolf is going to take over your life? And the granddad says, well, it depends on which wolf you feed.
Right.
And I think ultimately that has to do with a lot of choices. The more bad choices you make leads to more bad choices because you're feeding the bad wolf. And it's hard to see. And I think we obviously went to Warrior Path both looking for something that was going to help us get our lives back into focus, because I think this is that thing for all sheepdogs, right? This is about the warrior mindset and the service mindset between military and first responders and whatever group of people out there that are about serving others. Is we fail miserably at taking care of ourselves.
Right.
We're so good at fixing others. And I look at my own career as yours from a standpoint of, for all of us as senior enlisted, just like officers, but especially I think on that senior enlisted part, because we are invested in a much more direct way with our junior troops. Because we go and learn what's going on with a troop, and, you know, a soldier or Marine, and then we go back and advise the commander, right? We advise whoever ultimately then has to make the decision. But the information we're giving is from an intimate level of understanding what the problem is.
Right.
We then share it third person, and then they make a decision based on what we tell them.
Right.
but we invested in those individuals, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
we're
yeah.
we're trying to fix them. We're trying to fix the problem even before we take it to the commander. And I think, for me, Chris, this is kind of that peer thing where, one, I respect and love you so much as a brother, is it's a lonely position
Right. I mean,
being.
you think about it. You just talked about that command relationship.
Uh-huh.
I had to point this out a couple of times to some commanders I served with. The typical officer will serve their first 18 to 24 months as a platoon leader. So we'll give them 2 years.
Yeah.
And it'll be a break before they turn out to be a company commander. And then they'll do that we'll give them 2 years. And then they might get that opportunity to lead a battalion. And now they're a battalion commander. We'll give them another 2 years. By that time, they have a sergeant major or a senior non-commissioned officer that's standing beside them. And they've only got 6 years of leadership time, true leadership where they were in command.
Right.
But meanwhile, that senior non-commissioned officer standing next to them has had nothing but continuous time in the saddle leading, as you said, direct leadership.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it only serves that as a commander and a command team that they listen to that advisement, because you've been nonstop in that loop of, like you said, intimately being connected to those troops on the ground, to whereas they were away in the staff or in some school, and then they come back to lead, and then they leave, and then command the staff again or some school, and then they come back to lead. And so, yeah, they that opportunity for, let's say, practiced and trained leadership happens continuously in the enlisted ranks. It's not the same in the officer ranks.
Yeah, and I've growing up on the officer side, I've had these arguments, right? I mean, the joke is, the enlisted Marines are the real Marines. Officers in the Marine Corps aren't real Marines, right? Your real Marines don't come from Quantico, is what we would always kind of joke about. But it's not designed. I know any of you officers out there listening, we're not in any way whatsoever disparaging your value and importance, but there is a difference. And there will always be the argument, but the reality is direct and indirect leadership doesn't make either less valuable. It's
Right.
just different. And we've been in the mud, slept in the mud, and have an intimate relationship with these men and women that we're leading, because we're them in a different way. Because we've been there, done that with them, but we are expected to have a much deeper understanding. But there has to be that separation, because an officer has to make a removed decision.
Right.
Where it might be harder for you and I to make that decision because we're closer to that individual.
I mean, most enlisted that, as you stated earlier, mature into their leadership position, into their role. Most times they'll get promoted into it, but if they mature into it, one of the
That
things,
maturity comes promotion, yeah.
what they will wind up saying to their formation is, "I work for you." I mean,
Servant leadership.
right? Because if
I
you
learned way too
look at
late.
it from the other aspect, right, is you work for me, but it's actually reverse.
Yes.
As your leader, I need to give you, provide you, show you, teach you, like everything that you need in order to do the job that the military has asked of you. That's my role.
Yes.
And in order for you to be successful at that, then I have to do my job, which is do those things for you. And so when a mature non-commissioned officer or enlisted leader recognizes that, like, that's what changes their tone. It becomes, I work for you all. I remember the first time I told a platoon that, they looked at me like I was crazy. It was like, no, I work for you. If you need a dental appointment, or if you need physical therapy, if you pick it, whatever it is, I have to ensure that you have that.
Yeah.
Because when the balloon goes up and I need to call upon you, that is not the time for me as a leader to be able to turn around and say, well, I can't send this person because I failed them to get them where they
I
needed
need you
to be ready.
Yeah. That ready is that key, right?
Right.
Well, in kind of closing, you and I have had some long conversations over the short number of years we've known each other, and I've enjoyed it every time. And I know for me, I could sit here for another hour or two, and you and I keep talking. But I know for our audience, we've tried to keep this within an hour, hour and a half. And Chris, I want to reiterate how much you've meant to my life and my growth, especially at this point in my career in life and within Sheepdog. You've made me a better man and a better leader, and I would say in many ways a better father and a lot of things in my life just by knowing you, and I appreciate you. But I want to say thank you. Thank you for your service. Thank you for everything that you've given to our nation. But thank you for continuing to give what you give now. I mean, and you've given so much through Warrior Path, and now you are leading through Struggle Well in a heavy way, taking Struggle Well out to our first responder community, and to others that need the power of post-traumatic growth, that need to understand what can come from that, right? That from your struggles truly can come strength, but you've got to know how to manage that properly. You've got to understand that process. And I would say, and it's hard in some ways, because I know you probably miss the Army like I miss the Marine Corps in many ways. There's things we don't miss, but the things that we do, the camaraderie, the esprit de corps, the opportunity to lead young men and women. But I would say that we both have been blessed with the opportunity to make as much of a big difference now as we ever did in uniform.
Right.
For me, I feel like I'm better equipped through this organization today, through what we offer as an organization. And even though, unfortunately, I'm not in the dirt with the troops like I used to be in some ways, I'm in a position to facilitate an opportunity to make our men and women better that have served.
Right.
And I'm blessed for that. I'm blessed in being able to be part of Warrior Path and Struggle Well with you. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you for being here with us today, and thank you for all that you do and all that you're going to do through Warrior Path and Struggle Well.
Well, thank you for your support, and thank you for this opportunity as well. And, when we talk about what we do in this community of Warrior Path, post-traumatic growth, any of these things, the whole philosophy and concept behind it, what really keeps me embedded and tied to it is that this is something that everybody can use.
Yes.
Right? And my hope is that one day, our great grandchildren don't have to attend the training that we provide. Right? Like it's a natural way of us living where we take care of each other in a way. We help each other to get through certain things, but more importantly, that we as individuals have the ability to really navigate and, like you said earlier, manage our emotions, our own emotions, right? So that we can live the life that we deserve. So yeah, I'm just glad to be a part of that.
Oh, good. Well, and it's a little exciting. You're here at Heroes Ranch with us because we're hosting a Warrior Path directors meeting where directors throughout the Warrior Path network from all over the United States, as far away as Seattle, Washington, Maine, Florida, and all points in between. And we're blessed to be right here in the heart of America in southwest Missouri at Heroes Ranch, and which gave us the opportunity to do this podcast today. Yeah. So thanks again, and Sheepdog Nation. Hey, a great podcast today, one that I thoroughly enjoyed. Having Chris here with us today, and I hope you will enjoy today's podcast as much as I have in this visit. Podcast number 10 again, and we'll see you for podcast number 11 here in a couple weeks. Thanks again for listening. God bless all of you out there and our fellow sheepdogs. Thank you for what you do every day to keep this great nation of ours safe. It's because of you that we enjoy so many of the freedoms that we take for granted. Thank you for what you mean to me and everyone like you. We're out.